Just ahead on Tempo in Depth, according to the latest numbers, there are 21.8 million military veterans in the U.S., and 9 million of them are over age 65. Tonight, we pay tribute to all our veterans as we spend time learning about their bravery and service that made this country the land of the free and the brave. Don't go anywhere as we celebrate our veterans right now on Tempo in Depth. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Amy Burkett. Tonight, we pay tribute to our veterans. We're very happy to have a full studio audience with high school students from Emmaus Baptist School, students from the Bethlehem Area Vocational School's video production class, and residents of Phoebe Terrace in Allentown. But before we get started, I'd like to pay tribute to all of the veterans who are in our audience. If you'd please stand and be recognized, we owe you a debt of gratitude. And to say thank you for your service just doesn't seem to be enough to do for someone who we owe our freedom to. You may have a seat now. In 2000, the Library of Congress launched an extensive effort to archive first-hand accounts from America's veterans. Since then, they've collected more than 65,000 individual stories from servicemen and women from World War I through the current conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. In the Lehigh Valley, 2 men have taken up the charge. Tempo in Depth's Laura McHugh tells us more.
Every veteran has a story.
He was a 2-time prisoner of war.
I was in the 3rd wave when we hit Belly Low.
This guy was the 2nd wave on Omaha Beach, D-Day. D-Day. Terrible, terrible situation.
He was a Battle of the Bulge veteran. He had 3 times he should have been killed.
Recording these stories has become a labor of love for Mike Seawards, who works all day at his Allentown steak shop.
Small, medium, or large?
Then he spends hours at night archiving veterans' interviews.
You always say to a veteran, thank you for your service, but I always thought there has to be more than just thank you for your service. So I thought, what a better way to honor a veteran than to document their stories for themselves, their families, future generations, and the Library of Congress will archive it forever.
Not a veteran himself, Mike narrowly missed the draft for the Vietnam War, but now serves his country as the co-founder of the Lehigh Valley Veterans History Project.
And the stories are, they're things you won't read in a history book. They're heartbreaking, they're funny, they're life-changing stories.
It's amazing, looking at these guys and hearing their stories, you're looking into the eyes of history. You'll never hear this ever again when those guys are gone.
Along with co-founder Dick Musselman, Mike has recorded and transcribed interviews from about 125 veterans since 2007.
Mike collects some stories from guest speakers here at the group's monthly meetings, but says he records most where the veterans are their most comfortable, right inside their own homes.
While they collect stories from any veteran of war, they focus primarily on those who served during World War II.
There were 16 million people in World War II, Americans in World War II. There's barely 2 million left. We're losing those guys at 1,000 a day. And, at one point they're going to vanish. Who's going to tell the story? Who's going to tell the firsthand experience of what happened?
86-year-old Matt Gutman, a naval officer who served in the Pacific Theater during World War II, has twice shared his story. He showed me some of his prized possessions: a samurai sword taken from a Japanese soldier after the war, a commendation for sweeping mines in Japanese harbors, and the knife and grenade given to him by a Marine on his first invasion. Matt was about 18 years old when he piloted a Higgins boat loaded with 36 Marines onto the beaches at Peleliu.
And I would say about 1/3 of them Marines never made it. They got killed instantly. Storming the beach. I could see it I could see it right today yet.
Matt's journeys took him to battles in Leyte and Luzon in the Philippines, where he took fire from Japanese kamikaze pilots.
We're firing our guns constantly. I was a gunner in a 20mm gun at that time, when I wasn't in that boat. We stayed at our guns 3 days and 3 nights.
During the Pacific's most fierce battle, Matt took troops ashore in the first wave at Okinawa. Days later, as Americans celebrated victory stateside, Matt rejoiced aboard his ship.
When the war ended, we were in Buckner Bay. That night, our mast lights, our ship's lights, all were beaming all over in that whole bay. what a wonderful feeling that was to me. It was like heaven was opening up, you know?
Matt's memories replay clearly in his mind's eye today, but Skip Brightfield still struggles to remember some details of his service in Vietnam more than 40 years after his return home.
Trauma is a strange thing. It does strange things to your mind, and you know, they say that when somebody's in a bad accident, they don't even remember the accident. Well, you can imagine being in an accident for 360 days, every day, not knowing if you're coming home.
Drafted into the Army, Skip served almost a year in Vietnam from 1968 to 1969, spending most of his time as a platoon sergeant for a reconnaissance unit.
Nobody volunteers for reconnaissance. It's one of the worst jobs, other than door gunners in Vietnam.
Skip earned 3 Bronze Stars for his service. On 2 different occasions, he says he pulled soldiers from burning helicopters. But like many Vietnam War veterans, Skip has post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. He says hardly a day goes by that he doesn't think about shooting a young soldier, and he still remembers watching the soldier in the next foxhole get shot in the head by a sniper.
In a sense, you say, gee, that bullet should have been for me. If I had sat up to wake him up, I'd be gone. The sniper was waiting.
Skip just recently started to talk about his service in Vietnam. For now, he volunteers to help Mike and Dick with the project, but hopes one day his story can join Matt Gutman's and thousands of others archived forever in the Library of Congress. For Tempo InDepth, I'm Laura McHugh reporting.
Thank you. I want you to meet a wonderful new friend of mine. We have a veteran joining us right now. It is the Reverend Edward McElduff. He is a World War II veteran. And now you have quite a story, Reverend. You were on your way to the coast of Normandy. It was D-Day, June 6th, 1944. And it was a pretty horrific day. Tell us a little bit.
Well, we, approaching the coast, we hit a mine. And the concussion and the force of the blast was really devastating. I can remember being up in the chart house, and suddenly, after we got hit, or the mine exploded, I was blown down a flight of steps, and I was impaled on a gun rack. The rifles were all in this position. So I was impaled there for a while. And ultimately, as the ship that was dead in the water, it just rolled with the tide, and I rolled off. And when we got back to England, I went to a British Naval Hospital, and I stayed there just for a brief period of time, and then I met some friends in England who kind of took me in and helped me get my act together again.
What a horrible thing to have to go through. Can you take us back to that time when you were headed off, your family, your friends sending you off to war? What type of feelings were going through everyone's mind?
Well, I don't know what was going through their mind. I know what was going through my mind. I was too young and too naive even to be frightened. I can remember going in on D-Day. I think I was the only guy on the ship that fell asleep. But I figured, hey, what will be, will be. But I didn't put it in those words. I was just simply accepting. I should have been somewhat more frightened, if that's the word to use, than I was. But I was.
Who wear the Purple Heart Medal do so because of extraordinary service to their country in a time of conflict and war. They're among servicemen and women wounded and killed in action. The medal's history goes back to George Washington and the American Revolution. General Washington created it as a Medal of Merit to honor ordinary soldiers who proved themselves on the battlefield. 1.7 million Purple Hearts have been awarded from World War I to the most recent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Tempo InDepth's Grover Silcox visited with 4 veterans of the local chapter of the Military Order of the Purple Heart and learned firsthand about the price they paid to serve their country.
These men know the price of war because they paid it.
We had battles that were constantly going on. I got hit initially from an M79 that they had captured, which basically hit me in my face. Did not shatter, Then I blow up. It just shattered my face.
As I turned around, I got shot in the back. So I fell right there.
They saw their buddies pay for it.
All of a sudden we hear this shouting, and these guys are coming down the road in this Jeep with towing this cannon, and they hit those mines and set about half a dozen or more of them off and blew themselves apart.
The second grenade came in and exploded, and it killed the one fellow who was with me.
But these men also believe that the cost of war is often the price for preserving a democracy. That's why they fought on battlefields far from home and suffered war wounds that almost killed them. Vellner, Bruce Boyce, Bob Lord, and Les Cruz now serve as officers of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, Sergeant William R. Greff, Chapter 170, headquartered in Willow Grove. With 545 members, all Purple Heart recipients, the chapter stands as the third largest in the nation. Each member has a story to tell.
Order arms.
Bruce Boyce served as a radio operator in the 1st Recon Battalion, 1st Marine Corps Division in Vietnam. He and his fellow Marines went out in groups of 6 to gather information on North Vietnamese troops. He earned his Purple Heart on May 5, 1970, at the age of 21 when a bullet from an AK-47 hit him in the back during an enemy ambush.
I was bleeding, but I was still awake, and I was the senior radio operator, and the guy that I was training, he didn't know how to call in a medevac, so I actually had to call in my own medevac. And when the chopper came, it couldn't land. So they had to drop down something called the jungle penetrator, and they put these loops around your chest, and now while we're fighting, they're pulling me up.
He sustained serious wounds.
I was shot in the lower back right by my spine, but the bullet didn't come out. My colon was messed up, my bladder had a hole in it, my intestines were a mess. I had a lot of stomach injuries, and when the bullet hit my pelvis, it exploded, so that's why there was all those fragments. So it took a long time for all that to heal.
Bob Lord was only 19 years old when he earned his Purple Heart. He served in Vietnam with the 4th Infantry Division. During one of many firefights, he got hit in the face with an unexploded rocket grenade and took injuries to his body from another grenade that went off next to him.
They put me into a bag because when you look at a facial injury and you have the guts of an individual hanging out and the arm kind of dangling, they thought I was dead. My lungs were also punctured at the time, along with my gallbladder, my liver, and I happened to gurgle. And the gurgling unzipped the bag that I was in.
Ron Vellner of the 224th Tank Company, 40th Infantry Division, earned his Purple Heart in Korea on July 11, 1953. He and his fellow soldiers, posted on a mountaintop overlooking a valley called the Punch Bowl, fled from their bunker in a hail of mortar fire.
We were trying to get to our tanks. So I had my .45, I ran out and didn't make it to the tank. I got hit, and I was laying on the ground, and one of the guys was under the tank. He crawled out, got a hold of me, pulled me under the tank. Next thing I knew, I was in a MASH unit.
Ron had a hole in his leg the size of his fist. Hospitalized in Japan, he underwent surgery and recuperation, then headed for home.
I had a lot of anger inside me, a lot. And I kept it in because I thought, well, this is the way it is. When you come home, you just go back to your life. But inside, you don't go back to your life.
For these and other veterans like them, war comes back in the form of post-traumatic stress disorder. Les Cruz, a member of the 82nd Airborne Division, suffered with it after his experiences in Europe during World War II. At 20 years old, Les earned his Purple Heart on January 3, 1945, in snow-covered Belgium during the Battle of the Bulge.
We were in a pine forest and stuff was just flying all over the place. And you didn't know who was getting what, So it was a bad day. And when I was wounded, I knew I was wounded. I lost my thumb and I had this torn apart. They put it all back together, so it's really fine now. But I carry that with me forever, the shrapnel. I lost a young tent buddy from Iowa, a couple other guys. It's a bad day.
These men had better days ahead. They returned home and built lives of their own. They married, had children and grandchildren, even great-grandchildren. They went back to school, made a good living, and realized the benefits of peace, which is what they and thousands of their brothers and sisters fought and paid for. Many
Appreciate our next guest joining me in this studio. We have David Vendetta. He's an author. He has been a longtime editor with The Morning Call, and the new book is War Stories in Their Own Words. David, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Help us understand just how important it is to preserve the stories of these veterans. You've spent over a decade doing it, and some sadness of those stories you've told in the past. Not all of them are still with us.
Correct. We need to have a permanent record of what our veterans experienced so that future generations will have a more complete idea of what war is all about, an up-close and personal view. The ordinary people who did and saw extraordinary things when the country called them to war.
Now, you recorded more than 80 stories over the years?
Almost 90.
Almost 90 stories. And of those 90 stories, you wheedled it down to about 34 in the book, and yet how many are no longer with us?
Of those 34 in the book, almost half are gone. 15.
We're losing our World War II veterans at a staggering pace, statistics tell us.
Yes.
What is the most surprising? Reverend McElduff is one of the stories in your book. I failed to mention that earlier, but a wonderful story, and you love it when it has that positive ending. He went on to make a great impact on his community. What other surprises did you learn by creating those stories?
The surprises to me were, I feel as if I'm shaking hands with history whenever I meet a veteran of war. These are people who were just ordinary folks who got onto the world stage and did what they had to do. And then they've come home, and it's many years later, and you don't realize what they have experienced because they don't talk about it all that much. And this was the big surprise for me. I had these uncles who all served in either the European or any one of those theaters in World War II, and my own father who served in the North Atlantic and in the Coast Guard. And I never got a chance to talk to my father about it because at the time I got interested in the mid-90s, he was already deep in the fog of Alzheimer's. And to this day, I regret that I never asked my dad, what was it like? What did you do? I need to know, and I don't.
And is that kind of the reason that made you want to do this? It started out as just articles in the newspaper, in their own words, and letting the people tell their own stories. What made you want to put the book together?
Well, I got to go back a little bit. In the mid-1990s, I got interested in what happened to a cousin of mine who was killed in the Vietnam War. And in getting interested in him, he was someone I didn't even know, hardly. And so I had to talk to my own family to find out about him. And in talking to my family, that's when I realized that there are these stories out there. So a few years come along, and it's 1999, and the Morning Call wants to do something special to mark the end of the century. So we're going to do a series, and because I had this interest in veterans at that point already, I was asked to be in charge of it. And what we did was we invited veterans to write in their own stories. And we'd say, okay, we'll publish about 20 of them. Well, we got some submissions, but we didn't get nearly as many as we would like to have had.
David, time is running out, and people can read about it, and they can find it, I'm sure, on the Morning Call's website, how they can get the book.
Okay.
And we're grateful that you took the time to preserve these stories, and we appreciate it so very much. A good part of our community. I've got one more task for you to do, so don't run away.
Okay.
Well, finally tonight, we leave you with some more information to help you learn about our veterans. At the Library of Congress's website at loc.gov/vets, you can learn more about the Veterans History Project and watch veterans interviews. You can contact the Lehigh Valley chapter to share your story at lvveteranshistory.org or by calling Mike at 610-434-5210. And you can read more about the Military Order of the Purple Heart at purpleheart.org. We'd love to have your